is Natalie, who's here from Yuma, and she just is trying to informally introduce her. And so be sure to meet Natalie. I'm sure we'll be speaking with her more in the future. So that's as informal as we're going to do it. Okay, well, I think it's 10 o'clock, so I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is January 27th here in Globe, and I've asked Kim Manfredi to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, if we'd all stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, our first order of business this morning is a request for funds, and it's item 2A. Information, discussion, action to approve an economic development agreement number 2026-0188 between Gila County and Rim Country Regional Chamber of Commerce in the amount of $5,000, which the board has determined to be for the benefit of the public. And with us today, we have Curtis Mattingly and Craig Swartwood that represent the chamber. They're both on the board.
Hope and pray that Globe Miami gets some relief from the floods that they had. And wanted to offer the Chamber of Commerce's help if there's anything we can do. So,
Thank you.
So I wanted to start it. I'm here today because I am now I don't think I have an official title, but they call me the Special Events Coordinator for the Chamber of Commerce. And about 3 months ago, we had the opportunity, we had called the governor's office, and she sent down a nice young lady from Sholo to see what the governor's office could do for rural Arizona. And as you know, the chamber is a bipartisan organization and don't really get involved in politics. And we talked about everything from rural education to the college at Globe and Payson Chairs, and how they're not taken care of equitably for funding. And as the young lady left, we asked her, why doesn't the governor ever come to rural Arizona and do a State of the State address? Always does it down in the state of Maricopa. And when she left, we laughed about it and kind of said, that's the last we're going to hear from her. But lo and behold, like three weeks later, we get a call back from the governor's office. I would like to come to Payson and do a State of the Rural Arizona from Payson, Arizona. She's also going to do one in Flagstaff. But she said, would the Chamber of Commerce be willing to help sponsor it, as well as make sure that people get invited? We said, well, what kind of people? And she said she would like all the elected officials from around northern Arizona that's not in the influence of Flagstaff. She would like a strong group of constituents. And so, long story short, she's coming to Payson. We got to thinking maybe you guys would be willing to help sponsor it, because we got to provide meals for everyone. And unbeknownst to me, she's got quite a entourage that comes with her, including security details. So that's why we're here. We'd love to have a lot of people from southern Gila County come. We want to know how many tickets you would like to have. I brought a few today, but we'll get more. But it's nonpartisan, it's no cheering, no booing, it's listening, and hopefully we can ask her some pointed questions to see how our part of the state can be helped by the governor's office, and perhaps she and the legislature can help us with the federal government. So we're requesting anywhere from $500 to $7,500. I will be back again at some point in time, I hope, with a full membership. Anything that the membership will include, we will credit what you do for economic development today to the membership. And hopefully, Rim Country Chamber can work more closely with Globe Miami Chamber. And we stopped there already today once. So any questions?
Supervisor Humphrey.
I have no questions. I think it's a great deal that you're reaching for, and perhaps it'll help make her more aware of rural Arizona.
Yeah.
And the people in it, and some of the things that we need. And and I would be happy to help in any way that I can in this, if there's room.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Klein.
Same with me, Craig. Thank you for putting all this together. That's a big task.
Yeah.
You know, that's gonna keep you busy for a little while, so.
Well, I've got a lot of help, like Curtis and Jesse at the chamber, so it's not, many hands make light work.
That's
We have
true.
many hands helping, so.
That's true, but thank you so much for putting this together.
You're welcome, Woody.
Craig, let me help clarify. I understand that there will not be a fee for the meal.
None.
So you're not selling tickets.
We're giving tickets away. I
Okay.
think it's important
And
people hear.
you're here to ask for 5,000?
Yes.
Or if we're more generous, you'd be happy to do that as well?
It wouldn't break my heart.
And the money will be coming from where, James?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, it will be coming from our state revenue sharing, so it will be non-tax dollars. In essence, the lottery money, which I determine as a voluntary contribution to government funding. That we'll use that money, not from your constituent funds, but from some other money that we have budgeted for this.
Okay. And so we have 5,000 down here, but would you be willing to do more if we decided to do that?
I guess, Mr. Chairman, my preference would be that we'll step up 5,000. If you want to increase that, to go ahead and use your constituent funds for that, which is
Okay.
a source of money. But if you're willing to kick more money from each of your constituent funds, then I think that would be appropriate.
Okay, I appreciate that. And so thank you, Craig, and thank you, Curtis, for coming. And so with that, I will call for motion.
I don't think we've finished yet.
We're not finished yet, I'm sorry.
Well, because James is willing to do the 5. And he said if we want to do more than that, it's out of constituent funds. And so, and you said something about 75. Okay, well, out of my constituent funds, I would be willing to help you get to that 75.
Thank you.
Okay,
And so would I.
okay, and I as well. So the math gets problematic at 75, so
25 divided by 3 is what each of us will give, apparently. If that's,
Yeah.
I mean, I can't
That's fine.
speak for you guys, but I'm willing to give a third of the 2,500 to get you
okay,
the 7,500 that you would like, and so then that could be in the motion that James will do the 5,000 and the Board of Supervisors will split.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
how about if I do 6,000 and if you do 500, then that would get us to the 75.
Okay,
Hey, as long as we get there, I'm happy with it.
okay.
This is one of the finest auctions I've ever been to.
Let's clarify that in a motion.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I make a motion that the amount to be funded to the Rim Country Regional Chamber would be $6,000 from Mr. Minlove and his funding, and the Board of Supervisors will each put in $500 to make it a total donation of $7,500
That the board has determined.
that the board has be determined to be for the benefit of the public.
Thank you for that motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve. Those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Here's,
Thank you, Craig.
Yeah, thank you, Craig, for all you do. And
Thank you, sir.
I would only request that during that February 25th meeting that the Gila County would be mentioned and perhaps even an opportunity to say a word.
well, would you like an opportunity to be one of the people that introduced
If that is what you would like to do, we are here to help.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I would recommend that we get at least enough tickets for all of our elected officials and maybe personal people that work closely with each of our elected officials.
Okay.
So that's somewhere in the neighborhood of 30, just at that.
Okay.
Well, then, we can put the county manager's office in charge of it.
County manager's office is in charge of that.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, we'll make sure we get that done. I know where they live.
Good.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen, for that. Let's get on to the easier section, 2B. Now, there's no action on the next two items, so this is information discussion to receive and discuss a staff presentation on the status and implementation of the short-term rental ordinance, and that is 2025-01, as approved by the Gila County Board on May 6, 2025. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. So I appreciate your time today to go over the short-term rental ordinance. I have a lot of information and it's going to be right in front of me, so please let me know if you have any questions. Interrupt me during this presentation. What I'd like to do is go over a little bit of a recap of the history, how we ended up with the short-term rental ordinance, board-approved ordinance, go into, since the board approved it, some of the data as how many short-term rentals have applied and we've issued license to. Some of the people who have applied for a license, we have declined to give them a license based on very, very detailed criteria, which involves the state statutes as well as the current county building code and those kinds of things. And what I'd like to do is go into detail with that and just sort of explain how they interact and led the staff to some of these decisions, and then get your feedback from there. Do we have any questions before I go into that?
I don't. This is like a work session. So
I'm good.
speak up if you like, so, okay.
Perfect. So if you recall, Chairman and members of the board, since 2023, we've had 5 work sessions regarding the short-term rental ordinance. Back in 2023, the board directed staff to present an ordinance for their consideration. We did that. We had several work sessions. If you recall, many people, many residents from around the county showed up to these work sessions and provided a lot of insight into short-term rentals. Many of the people that showed up were owners of short-term rentals, short-term rental properties in Gila County, so they were quite vocal to let us know what their thoughts were about these things. And we did, the board did adopt one short-term rental ordinance, and then we received direction to make some edits to that ordinance and bring it back to the board. And at that time, we took the board's recommendation. We met with a group in Pine Strawberry, their attorney. Between all of them, they owned multiple short-term rentals, with a resident of Young who wanted to open up a couple short-term rentals. So we met, Josh Beck and Randy Plumer and his staff met with these representatives and came up with an edited version of the short-term rental ordinance, which we presented to the board on May 6, 2025, and that particular ordinance was approved. And since May 6th, we've had quite a lot of activity. We've had to hire a company to let us know how many short-term rentals were in Gila County so we can get them licensed. So that's one of the requirements of the ordinance, is to become licensed. And since May 6th, there have been a total of 297 short-term rental permit applications that we have received, so close to 300. Of those 300, 7 of those were denied. And I'm going to go into the reasons why they were denied. 3 of those denials were denied because of lack of certificate of occupancy. In other words, through our building department, how we know a building is approved by meeting the current building code, the adopted building code, is if we issue a certificate of occupancy. And we do that by going out to the final product of this structure and we do an inspection. And if it meets the building code, we issue a certificate of occupancy. That's how we in Gila County know that that structure meets the current adopted building codes. The other 4 denials were for various reasons. One application was just zoned improperly. It was a commercial zoned property. They wanted to open up a short-term rental on that, and we had to deny that just because it's zoned improperly. Two of the applications involved structures that had been converted to habitat spaces without going through the permit process. So in other words, they converted some sort of structure on their property but didn't get building permits for those structures, and so we had to deny them. Also, one of the types of situations we've run into in Gila County is a cesspool. We have a lot of homes on cesspools in Gila County, and after discussion with our county attorney's office and the state of Arizona ADQ, the determination was made, if you are on a cesspool and you want to convert that house to a short-term rental, we cannot issue a license for that. That would be a change of use to that particular property, and therefore if you wanted to convert that home on a cesspool to a short-term rental, you'd have to bring the septic system up to current code, which means getting rid of the cesspool and installing a permitted alternative system or conventional septic system. So do we have any questions up until that point? Perfect. We also have about 260 potential short-term rental properties identified in addition to that 297. And we're trying to track those down as we speak. That 261 could be just properties that have multiple listings. The owner might have passed away, spouse might have passed away, the current spouse might not have known the passwords to the VRBO, Airbnb, those kinds of things. So we don't know if those are actual properties that are being utilized right now as short-term rentals, but our staff are going to go out to each individual property, try and contact a homeowner and see if they require a license. So when you have a short-term rental, people list these things on multiple websites, Facebook, Airbnb, VRBO, these kinds of things. So what we're trying to do is cross-reference all of that through the company we hired and make sure that we don't have any duplicates in our system for the short-term rentals. So I know that's sort of a lot to give you right away. So do you have any questions about how that is determined? Perfect. And what I'd like to do is now go into the denials. We've received requests from residents to open up short-term rentals in all sorts of different type of structures. So what I'd like to do is go over the state statutes which regulate why we deny these people the license, and the current building ordinance adopted by this board, which also ties into some of the reasons why we deny this. So we'll go on to the next slide. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to explain the term dwelling. That's important in our discussion because the state of Arizona, state statutes have a very specific definition for dwelling, which leads into our current building code and what we have to recognize when we go out and license these short-term rentals. And I'm going to also show how Arizona law requires uniform enforcement of dwelling standards. In other words, we can't pick and choose, right? That's sort of, we have some residents asking us, well, just allow us to have a shed as a short-term rental, and I'll explain, yes, we have received requests to turn sheds into short-term rentals, and why we can't allow a shed in one part of the county and another part of the county, we disallow that. And then I'm just going to sort of talk about, we have had residents threaten lawsuits. We have had residents angry with us. So I want to at least let the board know some of the liability risks if our staff doesn't follow the proper state statutes or building codes, or we ignore them, or we apply them unequally. So that's important to know. We have had residents ask us and threaten lawsuits if we don't give them a license for short-term rental. And so I want to at least let the board know some of those challenges that the staff are having. So 11-269-17, state statute. That is the state statute which allows municipalities and counties to regulate short-term rentals. Arizona law in 11-269-17 prohibits banning short-term rentals. So in other words, we as a county do not have the ability to say we are going to ban short-term rentals completely. However, when the state legislators passed 11-269-17, they gave us very specific regulations, what the county can and cannot do. And if you, one of the research projects that Randy and Kim and their staff did is pulling all of the municipalities and counties that have a current short-term rental ordinance, and surprisingly, not to us, but surprisingly, they're all exactly the same. Very small differences, because 11-269-17 only allows the counties and municipalities to do certain things. So you can't really make up stuff, so you copy and paste that law into an ordinance, and that's basically what most municipalities and counties have done. And I hope you have a copy of 11-269-17 there in your packet. So, yes, sir.
Yeah, I do. And I got some red underlined stuff I want to have you clarify. So you sent this to me. There's legal kind of language in it, I think. Under item B, item B includes like 9 different sub-paragraphs.
Correct, sir.
Okay. Item B says a county may not restrict the use or regulate vacation rentals or short-term rentals based on their classification. Okay, I don't know what classification means. Use or occupancy except as provided in this section. A county may, that sounds optional to me, a county may regulate vacation rentals or short-term rentals within the unincorporated area of the county as follows. And then there's 9 listings, okay? If you go to number 9, the county may to require the owner of a vacation rental or short-term rental to reside on the property if the property contains an accessory dwelling unit, and if a certificate of occupancy, certificate of compliance, or similar final approval for the accessory dwelling unit was issued by the county on or before September 14, 2024. So my question is the certificate of occupancy on these dwellings, certificate of completion or similar, optional according to the ARS? I don't know how to interpret that.
It's a good thing I have Mr. Joe Albo from the county attorney's office here to help me out with that. As far as your initial pointing out the 9 sections, we may regulate the short-term rentals based on their classification. So the classification is a short-term rental, right? That's the classification. So we may not say, we may not tell anybody, since you have a short-term rental, we're going to ban it, right? So it's a particular classification of a business / type of dwelling in the state's eyes. So we may, as a county, may not tell somebody who says they have a short-term rental that we don't allow short-term rentals. We have to allow it, and then we have to allow it based on the one of the 9 or multiple. It allows us to issue a license based on these 9 items here, and so. And later in my presentation, I'm going to give Mr. Albo a chance to give the county attorney's perspective. Part of my presentation is going to be options for the board, right? And one of the options for the board may be to get rid of the ordinance, right? If there's a lot of complaints from residents and the board decides that this is not something that they wanted to do. What I'm going to hopefully tie the knot to is the reason why, if the board decides to get rid of the ordinance, it still doesn't matter as far as a structure that's used as a short-term rental unit still must meet building codes. And I'll sort of go into that in a little bit as we get into the presentation. So,
My
although-
question is
yeah.
based on the ARS, not the county, because our county ordinance actually says it has to have some of this stuff, but I want to know if the state is allowing us, through the word may, the county may regulate or may not regulate, according to these 9 on this list. And that's what I want to know, is if we have the option on that number 9 to regulate with a certificate of occupancy or not.
So I'm gonna go into my opinion here. This is not my legal advice, but my opinion is that sometimes the state statutes are confusing. So there is a state statute, ARS 11-321, which requires counties, they must adopt building codes. So you have that state statute. It says that the counties have to adopt building codes. And then you also have, you go to ARS 11-861, which gives the authority to the board to adopt building codes. So you have to know the background there. So the state is, on one hand, is the state statute is saying the counties have to, and then they're given the authority to the board to adopt those building codes. And then part of those building codes and part of the state statute is, you can go to ARS 33-1310, which defines what a dwelling is. And I know I'm sort of going into a lot of detail here, but it gives a very specific definition of what a dwelling is. And a dwelling basically has to be approved through the building permitting system, through the building ordinance that's been adopted by the board. Some counties issue a certificate of occupancy. That's what we do here in Gila County. We issue a certificate of occupancy which signals to the homeowner that we've signed off that you've met the building ordinance and that the structure is safe. So that's what we use here. So now as far as the word may goes, that I'm gonna turn that over to Mr. Joe Albo if he has any additional thoughts on that.
The answer is you need to go back to subsection D. The second sentence says the county may regulate location or unincorporated areas as follows. I'm sorry. And then you get down to item 9, and the may is permissive, may not is mandatory. But the may in subsection 2 is permissive. It gives the board permission to do that or not. But you have to do that in context of everything else that Mr. O'Driscoll is talking about. The building codes that you've adopted, state laws that regulate planning, that regulate zoning in the county. And I'm not quite sure I understand your question about to require the owner to reside on the property. Is that the nature of the question?
No, that's just the first part of the number 9. Because we have the may or may not on that one, and we pretty much say we're not gonna regulate that.
Right.
We're given the option, are we given the option of issuing an STR without a certificate of occupancy?
That is what Mr. Driscoll was, I believe, trying to explain, that the certificate of occupancy isn't dependent on this statute. It's dependent on the building code that's been adopted by the county. And certificates of occupancy are issued under the building code and not under
Okay,
term rental
okay,
ordinance.
all right, that answers my question. So the state is not requiring it, our own building code is?
Our own building code requires it, yes, sir.
Yes,
And then
The
the
county is
state,
required to
Yeah.
adopt the building code.
right,
and the
okay.
state statute requires Gila County to adopt the building code. The board has adopted one, the first one, I believe, in 1987. And we've had several iterations adopted by the board since then. And then, and certificate of occupancy is part of that building permit process.
Okay, thank you.
So can we take it out of the building code?
That would have to be a question we ask our county attorney.
Because the way I've been led to understand is as a county board, we can pick and choose what we want in the building code. Is that correct?
I do not know, sir, but I can get the answer.
We'd have to be able to.
We got the guy right behind you.
Oh, come on up, Randy.
So yes, the answer is yes. We are allowed to modify our building code to meet the ISO. You take the C of O out of, certificate of occupancy out of the code, you're probably not going to be able to get insurance or a loan, because that's the things that the bank use and the insurance companies use to determine that that house has went through the process. So yes is the answer, but you run into other things that can come into play. I just yesterday had a guy that hadn't had a C of O for a week, and he can't get insurance until he gives that C of O to the insurance company. So that is, so I guess
So-
your answer is yes, but I don't know that you would want to.
So I know of dwellings that have not gotten a CFO due to our building codes in unincorporated areas, and they've gotten loans and everything else. So I think, you know, just looking out from the outside, it makes me wonder if that can't be something that's left to the property owner. Do you want to go through the hoops and get one, or do you not?
So to meet the building code, a C of O, the way it is written, it requires it. I did call the ISO yesterday, which is the International State Office of Insurance. They are not aware of that we are not enforcing the code on all of Gila County as of now. So I don't know if that was decided that what would happen. I'm not sure, and he wasn't sure.
I guess one of the best answers I can give as far as this goes, and it sounds like a non-answer, is since Arizona requires us to adopt building codes. What goes into the building code is what you're asking, Supervisor Klein. Can the board pick and choose what goes into the building code and what stays out? The specific answer to that, I do not know. I mean, I'm gonna have to do a little bit more research with the county attorney as far as the state statute, which requires the counties to adopt the building code, to see if there's exceptions as far as the state statute goes, or at least get help from the county attorney on doing some research on that. And that sounds like a non-answer, but
I'm just trying to gather facts. I'm not trying to lead the direction in my mind. I just want to know what we're able to do and what we're not able to do, and what the collateral issues might be. Supervisor.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, for instance, that has come to us before, someone wanted to get a building permit in a flood zone, and they came to the board because they weren't allowed to, and we had the right to overrule that and allow them to build their structure. But the penalty for that is, if that was approved and we, as a board, went against codes and allowing people to build in flood zones and floodways, then the insurance companies would penalize the entire county. So if we don't watch what we do with staying within state ordinances, then the insurance companies will pretty much raise the whole county or drop the whole county in insurance. So the fact that we can make decisions, it costs the whole county. And I would rather look out for the majority than the few, and make decisions for a few that cost the majority.
I understand what you're saying. We're already doing that now. We're gonna lead into it. But that's already happening now and has been happening for many. And yet these people are still buying the insurance, doing what they need to do. That hasn't been an issue with anybody. Nobody's been rejected. These are people that don't live in floodplains, mind you, but life's normal, it goes on. And so when I asked Randy about that in the building code, you know, what we can do with the building code,
Yeah, because like I say, I don't want to make decisions for a few that affect the majority.
no, I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that through a lot of time, it's already happening.
Well, if it is, I didn't know about it because in my district, I've been pretty strict with people, especially with the new bridge and all the structures that are going on there. We have to really try to control on how that grows. And so, it's been a fight with, keeping people within range of permits and occupancy. And so if there's parts that are not, then, that could open a whole can of worms for the entire county. So, like I say, that was just an example that I knew of from when it's come before the board before to overrule our permitting. It could cost. And so, anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Supervisor. Yeah, one of the things in the research I've been doing for this presentation and with Randy and his team, building codes and things, is it sure seems like Arizona, the state, will allow the board a lot of latitude as far as what to adopt, what not to adopt in the building code. I don't know that for sure, but that's just my opinion. But they're also very clear that there are consequences, and a lot of consequences which involve loan rates, ISO, insurance, fire insurance, those kinds of things. So I guess my advice to the board is possibly, yes, there's some latitude that the board can make some changes to the building code. And if that's the direction that the board wants staff to go in, we'll also bring in the information about what are some of the consequences that could possibly happen. So, you know, that's sort of where what we're finding out with our research in the state statutes.
So, what I've seen, you know, we tackled this elephant because we kind of got put in a corner. It had more to do with the people that were abusing the short-term rental stuff than anything. That's my recollection of it, the ones that were running rampant. So we did that. We had good meetings on it. A lot of people came together and worked together and came to a solution on it, to find out that some of those people today, and I know the numbers you got, but there's more numbers out there. They just haven't come forth because there's no use. Have stepped up to the plate, willing to buy the license and things like that. But there's no way they're gonna get a CFO. And it's not because of shoddy craftsmanship. It's not because they're living in sheds. It's because of other circumstances that we're gonna address here a little later on. But so we got people that's wanting to do the right thing and become licensed for short-term rentals that under this current direction that we're going right now is not going to do that. And that's why I ask these questions, like, is there something we can do to tweak this to be able to cover some of these people and get them licensed and get them on board to go on. I've got a lady with a tent, big tent, nice tent. She's not gonna be able to get a license on that. And Randy's dealt with this too, you know, and come up with solutions on it. The sheds, you know, fire escapes, things like that. There's options for that you can change, but there's no CFOs on those buildings. And so this is all gonna come about, and it's gonna hit some people that are really trying to do the right thing, and because of bureaucracy isn't gonna be able to.
I got a question. If someone is allowed to have a tent as a short-term rental, do you want to drive around Gila County, Tonto Basin, and every other place and have tents in people's yards with people living in them?
Well, this isn't a tent like you're imagining. This is like one of those big Indian-style tents that goes up with the poles through the roof.
Oh, yeah, no, I understand, but if you allow it, then you're gonna have to get a definition of what kind of a tent. could be allowed, what kind of a.
Well, these are issues that we're facing now that we didn't know we were gonna face when we put this together. That's why I'm bringing this up. I'll tell you what, Tim, be honest with you, I'd rather look at some of these tents than I would some of these residents that you know, that's the other side to this coin. But I'm trying to throw this out here that we actually have people that are on board with this, wanting to do the right thing, that we've tied their hands, or the state's tied their hands, or whatever. And I just kind of want to see how this turns out and how we can even remotely think we can work.
Are those people in the hundreds or in the thousands?
I have no idea.
Okay. It seems to me that there's a lot more people that can get a permit than people that can't.
Michael, I know you have a lengthy presentation, and we don't want to interrupt
Oh, no,
that
this-
completely, because I think you have things that might help us
Let's get on to
answer what
other
we're
information.
questioning right now.
Chairman, absolutely.
So-
I love this discussion. My presentation does not have to go in a particular
Well,
order.
and I
so-
appreciate the flexibility, because I think we're all very familiar with really the core of it. And the question that's being proposed is, how many problems do we have? You identified 7 so far, 3 of which do not have a C of O, non-permitted. And so that is a low number, and I agree. And it's unfortunate if they're not going to be able to get what they want, the use out of the property. So I want to know, how is it that we arrived at a point where, your own words here, that we had ununiform enforcement of our building code? How did we get there? Because I don't think that's very common in the other counties.
Well, that's
And
a-
this may go
that's
back
a-
to 1912, I don't know. But why is it that, and we know we're talking about Young, we know we're talking about that area, that
Right.
there's properties in there that have not been required to go through the entire permitting process, and now this is arisen, and it's an unforeseen consequence.
Yeah, Chairman, members of the board, that was going to be part of my second presentation in the building permitting work session
Yeah,
number 2.
they
But we
kinda
can talk about it.
commingle, yeah,
We're
okay.
commingling that, and if this board is okay, we can go over all of that as well, because they're very closely related.
Yeah.
Because state statute for short-term rentals requires building code ordinance enforcement. And so, yes, there has been a particular area, Young in Arizona, where uniform enforcement of the building ordinance has not occurred. So that's one of the discussion points that Supervisor Klein wanted to have during this meeting, and how we can come to a solution from this point forward. And I'll explain how we got there if you give me a minute.
Sure.
Because what's important to the previous discussion that you were having is the dwelling definition, right? In order for a short-term rental to be licensed, it must be a dwelling. Because somebody wants to rent out a shed, it doesn't make it a short-term rental that's approved, right? It's not that I want to rent something that makes it a dwelling. A dwelling has a very specific definition by state statutes, which is listed in ARS State Statute 33-13-10, number 4. So you have to meet that definition of a dwelling unit, and if you do, then you have to get it permitted through the building ordinance that's been adopted, right? So a dwelling unit means a structure or part of the structure that is used as a home, residence, or sleeping place by one person who maintains a household, or by 2 or more persons who maintain a common household. Dwelling unit does not include real property used to accommodate a mobile home unless the mobile home is rented or leased by landlord. So this brings up another hot topic item, RVs. RVs are not allowed to be short-term rentals, right? They don't meet the definition of a dwelling. So we cannot issue a license to an RV to be a short-term rental either, along with, unless somebody converts that RV into a dwelling unit, which may or may not be possible. I'm not really sure. I do know that there is just to give an example, there is a a restaurant in Mesa, Arizona that used an RV and converted that into a commercial kitchen, which is a pretty nifty idea, but it did go through the building ordinance process. And they had to meet state code for food and those kinds of things and building code. So that is really key to this particular ordinance and state statute, what defines a dwelling and what doesn't. And then say, for instance, the board decides we don't like the short-term rental ordinance, or we don't like the building ordinance, so we're gonna get rid of it. Then state statute says the health and safety codes kick in, because state statute says we have to follow the fire, health and safety codes no matter what, and you have to have some sort of building codes adopted. And the health and safety codes, they require a living space to be habitable and in good condition, septic systems, and it has to be in a good condition, which basically meeting the definition of a dwelling. So you can get rid of the short-term rental ordinance, you can get rid of the building ordinance, or make it very few items that a person or homeowner needs to obtain to get a certificate of occupancy. You still have to follow the health and safety, Title 36 rules. That's state statute too. So they have a couple different layers. If you're not going to follow one, you have to follow the other. And they're very interrelated and similar. So I hope that sort of explains how the state statutes work.
It does, and like Supervisor Klein was saying, sometimes that really limits property right users. So let me ask you something though, because in the teepee, and it may be a very nice teepee, because it's an experience, okay? It's an experience. Someone wants to experience that. But it's not considered a dwelling. There must be a pathway that we can get to that. Hopefully, we can get to that and say we can issue a certificate of occupancy if these terms are met, something like that. And hopefully, we're going to be getting there. But in Strawberry, I know that there's a little area where they have antique Airstreams, trailers, RVs, if you will, that they rent out. How did we accommodate for that? Randy knows. So in other words, it's not just a hard and fast rule. There's ways to accommodate, right, Randy?
So they are zoned, and they became a hotel motel, zoning wise, and they went through engineering to get say that the Airstreams meet the requirements of a hotel motel, is how we got to that path
Okay.
there. So it is possible, but it requires the hurdles to get through to make that Airstream, and they had to do some of the stuff. I would tell you there's other people that are strict. You go to Prescott, there's the exact same thing. Airstreams, they made them put sprinklers in the Airstreams. So I mean,
Right.
it depends on what your ordinance says, what is required.
So that's the property owner making it work, not Gila County changing the laws to make it work.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And so the teepee or a shed or an old horse barn, all of those things could be converted if they go through our building code and meet the requirements.
Yes, sir.
It's just that they have not met those requirements, and that's what you're saying. We have to apply this uniformly.
And it could be as a hotel or motel rather than a home.
Dwelling.
There's very specific definitions what a hotel motel is, how many rooms.
Okay, yeah, right, but I mean,
If they-
okay, say if they wanted to have 10 TPs and they all did whatever and had sprinkler systems, then it would be a motel, then that would work, as long as they did what the little trailers did.
Correct, sir. As long as they met the building code, absolutely.
Thank you.
So I don't understand that, I guess. If you talk about Airstreams are RVs.
Say again?
Airstreams are RVs, correct?
They're not a short-term rental. They don't meet the requirements of a short-term rental. They meet the requirements of a hotel motel by what they had to do to the structure itself, the foundation they had to have, and all of the stuff that is required. A short-term rental is basically a dwelling, which is an R3. I know that's technical, but our stuff comes down into zoning. It's an R3. R3 is 1 and 2 family dwellings. This is not a 1 and 2 family dwellings. Those airstreams that we talked about are multifamily, which are hotels, more apartments and everything, and they have requirements to meet, same as an R3 would have to meet. So you could turn, and Michael's told me to be quiet, so I'm trying to be quick here, but the TP, let's just talk about TP. They could get engineering, and that was mentioned, to make it a R3 and become a short-term rental. They can do that. And that's where that certificate of completion comes in. The engineer provides that to us. We accept that. We don't give a C of O, but we approve that as one of the allowable uses to move forward to allow them to get to the short-term rental requirements. Did I answer your questions?
You answered mine.
I'm good, thank you.
So, just getting back to the dwelling part of that, right? It's not a county preference, right? We're not saying we're applying dwelling across the board, just to short-term rentals. So I want to be clear about that. This is not a county preference. This is how the state statutes define what a dwelling is, and what the definition of a dwelling is what leads to the building code. So that's sort of what I want to make clear here. We're not making this up. We're following state statute, what's in the ordinance that was passed by the board as well. And it's key that definition of the dwelling matters the most as far as when we issue a license for a short-term rental, it has to meet that definition. Questions about that? We just got done, I was gonna go into RV shed teepees and homes with cesspools, those kinds of things. And I guess my question now is, Chairman, members of the board, do you have any questions regarding those type of structures? As far as moving forward, if somebody wanted to convert any of those structures into a short-term rental, they can, they cannot, we don't know. It's up to the homeowner, it's up to the responsible party if they want to open a short-term rental to apply for the building code permit and meet those codes. So in a lot of cases, it would mean hiring an engineer to tell them exactly what they need to do to meet the current adopted building code.
I think the big thing with that is there's still a path forward for those folks, that there is a way they can do that. There's gonna be more important ones that are full-size houses that I don't know how they could back up on with engineering or architects to prove or disprove how that house was built without some really, really major involvement.
So, the engineering portion of it, right? They have, they're allowed license by the state to make assumptions. And they can do that legally, and they have capabilities and knowledge to do that. What they're going to do to get an engineer, just like we did with our red building out at the fairground. The engineer comes in, he looks at everything, looks at foundations, looks at walls, looks at this, looks at that, and he can make a determination that this appears to meet the building code. There will be things he looks at, not just structures. So now you gotta have windows that have a sill height at a certain height. You gotta have smoke detectors, you gotta have power, you gotta have sewage, you gotta have places to live, you gotta have places to cook. So he looks at all of that and says, okay, this appears to meet the building code that we have. We're on the 12, he could say it meets 24, whatever. And then he could send us that letter as his professional opinion, as licensed by the state, that this meets the code. I will then review that, I'll make sure what he writes, because we all write cop-out phrases in there, and I make sure that doesn't harm the county in what anything that we would accept. We look at that and accept that, and says he makes it, then I go in and I put that note into our program, which keeps everything forever, and we would go forward and say that this engineer said that this meets the requirements of an R3. We verified that, we would move forward. So it finding the right engineer who was willing to come out, right? Willing to show up, willing to be able to afford. It's just the same as we did for the red building. I found an engineer who was willing to come out and willing in our price range and willing to do all the stuff we need to do. He came out, wrote you his opinion. You may agree with it, you may not agree with it, and that's where I may go out to the site and verify what he said. But as a law, he is allowed to make that opinion. And it actually says I'm not allowed to change his interpretation or his opinion. I'm not allowed to change it. I don't have to accept it as the building official, but I'm not allowed to change it or force him to change it. So what I can tell him is that I'll accept this if you did this, you know, if you said this, but I'm not allowed to make him change it. I just don't have to accept it. So that's under state statute also. I'm not force him to change.
Thank you.
Andrew?
Mr. Chair, if I may, as a general contractor, I remodeled a lot of buildings and a lot of old buildings that didn't meet code, couldn't meet code. But as you say, working with an engineer we've reinforced trusses because they weren't rated. No egress, but the way the building was built, you couldn't make the windows bigger, but be able to install a door so that they have a way to get out if there's a fire. Block buildings that you can't rewire because you can't run them in the blocks, but do conduit exterior for wiring. So I remodeled an awful lot of old buildings that I had to work with engineers in order to get them permitted for me to be able to do what the customer wanted done to be able to remodel the home.
On that note, Tim, when you were done with, let's say, those remodels, did they issue CFOs on that?
They did.
Okay.
But it was working with an engineer and planning and zoning for the city of Globe and Gila County as well. It like Randy says, it's just getting the right engineer to work with issues that come up and look for solutions rather than anything else. Yeah, it's like, okay, we're gonna do this, but what's it gonna take and how? And, you know, then, yeah, it does become a cost. Engineers are expensive, and running interior conduit for wiring but if it, in the past, I've had success in getting it done with the right engineer on older buildings.
I just want to clarify your question. So to get a C of O, if you had the engineering ahead of time and he came to me, we have quite a few houses that are engineered when they come in and submit it for the first time. Then they would get C of O. You know, they have a bigger window in a wall than is what's allowed prescriptive. And the engineer said that works, and he submitted all that. Then they would get a C of O was done before. If it's not, then it's a certificate of completion, and which is one of the three options for it. Basically, it's a C of O, but it's done after the fact. That's what the state statute said there for a certificate of completion.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. Questions? So I know we're gonna get into some of the building permit issues here, but I'll just tie up the short-term rental part of this presentation by just giving you a couple thoughts, what staff and I came up with about short-term rentals. As far as the legality of short-term rentals and state statute and the ordinance that the board passed and is now an approved ordinance, you know, so Arizona law defines what a dwelling is, right? I read that to you. It defines what a dwelling is. It's very specific definition for use of human habitation. It allows it mandates the counties adopt the building codes, and Gila County has adopted building codes in the past, the IRC and IBC building codes. And so the building codes require a permit, an approval, and a final inspection certificate of occupancy before we are able to issue a license for a short-term rental on a particular structure. So that's how it sort of flows from the state statutes down to the county ordinances and what we are looking at when we license a short-term rental. So this isn't us telling short-term rental owners, you know, we're getting in your way. This is us saying these laws apply to everybody in the county evenly, and we have to apply that evenly across the county, and that's exactly what it is as far as state statute and the county ordinance goes, which mirror each other basically. So are there questions about that? So we can get into the fun part about the building permits and some of the uneven enforcement if we want to go into that, or yes, sir.
Let me ask you something, Michael. I mean, we've talked about that ordinance before, and quite honestly, you know, I think we all think we're doing the right thing and trying to help out, and we opened a can of worms on it. But prior to that ordinance, prior to us going to that step to do that, I had a lot of phone calls of issues from neighborhoods, not short-term rental people, but neighborhoods that were being overrun by these folks on weekends and all the issues. Since that ordinance, I have not had one call. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, even though there's some building code issues or things in the building codes or whatever that I feel like we probably need to address, I can't sit here and tell you that that ordinance was a bad thing. Because I honestly feel like we have slowed those issues way down. And I believe, if I remember right, as we put that ordinance together, we all could see ahead knowing that we're gonna have to revamp something, that there would be something coming up. You know, it was a new document, it was a new procedure. We knew there was gonna be something we were gonna have to readdress. And so I can't sit here and tell you that scrapping that ordinance is the way to go, and throwing it back like it was, because quite honestly, before we did that ordinance, there was a lot of problems. There really was. And so I just wanted to throw that out here. I think there's a lot of room for improvement. I think there's a lot of room for changing some things. I think there's room to work with the people that are trying to do it honestly and want to be legal. And I think those are the directions from my standpoint that we need to be looking at.
Chairman, members of the board, and Supervisor Klein, excellent point. We have seen a reduction in complaint calls for short-term rentals once people have applied for the licenses and they've seen the ordinance and know that we could revoke their license and fine them and put restrictions on them if they don't follow the noise ordinances. You know, a lot of complaints we were getting had to do with garbage and noise and parties. Even one case, I think a lady from Whispering Pines was saying that some tenants of the short-term rental behind their house were shooting a .22 out the back door towards their house. So we have seen a good reduction of those complaints, and that makes our life much easier. So that's a great point, Sue.
And let me just clarify something. You know, it's not just us looking at the short-term rentals and the folks that are getting licensed. We have to balance that out with the folks that don't have the short-term and live with them every day. I guess we have an obligation to both sides of this, is what I'm trying to say. And I think, right, wrong, or indifferent, and for the issues that we're seeing, that ordinance did slow a lot of that down. So thank you.
Yeah. So it's been a frustrating ordinance in some ways, and here we are addressing it again. So I look at it, now that I have numbers, and thank you, Michael, for what you presented so far. So far, 300 applications, 7 were denied. So, you know, that's 1% of the, we need a CPA, 1% of 300 is 3, right? So we have a very small percentage that are being affected negatively, and some of those had a short-term usage prior to our ordinance and now are being denied. And that, I think, is what is structurally the issue as to what do we do about those people that want to continue doing that. it sounds as though that they will have a pathway forward that may include some expenses. Is there anything internally in the county that we can do to provide the service of giving them their certificate of completion internally? In other words, we have engineers and we have building inspectors and all of that. Is that something that we can offer as we transition forward with this STR ordinance for a period of time?
Chairman, members of the board, and I'm going to ask Joe Albo to voice his opinion here after I give my opinion. In my opinion, asking county staff engineers to possibly work on projects that might be out of their expertise might be tricky and might be opening up a liability issue and conflict of interest for the county. But we do have Randy. He sits down with these people and tells them exactly what they need to do. He is extremely good at giving a homeowner the pathway forward to get a certificate of occupancy, right? The challenge we've had is most of the homeowners who come in expect us to give them the answers at no cost, right? Nobody wants to hire an engineer. And that's where we get a lot of blowback from the residents, is when Randy sits down and tells them that they need to hire an engineer that specializes in this, but it's gonna cost some money. They don't like to hear that. And so we get a lot of resistance from that end of the field, but as far as utilizing our own internal engineers to work on a project for a particular resident or homeowner, I think that might go into conflict of interest. If that's just my personal opinion, and if Joe can voice his opinion on that, I'd appreciate it.
I have no idea about conflict of interest, but it certainly creates liability issues for the county. And that was, by way of example, recently the county attorney's office was asked whether a licensed engineer on county staff could engineer floodplain projects that are county projects that don't affect public property. And the county attorney's office said, yes, we can do that, as so long as you aren't doing it on behalf of a person or interest outside of the county. We can engineer our own projects. And the same thing applies essentially to deputy county attorneys. I can't provide legal advice to anyone outside of Gila County because of my employment with the county.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, if we were to help one person, do you know how many constituents we would have in line for help the next time? And I don't believe we have enough staff to help everybody, and if we help one, then I would think that we'd be obligated to help everybody.
Good point. So that helps answer my question. I'm just trying to figure out, and I know a particular person, I won't mention him, in Young. I happen to like him very much, had a short-term rental, and he doesn't want to he wants to continue with that. But it's going to be expensive for him to have that opportunity. So it's either, no, you can't operate your property that way anymore. He's going to be one of the casualties of the ordinance, and because of the expense of having, and I don't even know what the expense is, but as soon as you say engineer, it sounds expensive. So, so that's a casualty, and I guess that probably is something we would like to avoid, the casualties. And I'm just trying to figure out options that we might be able to offer that would be less expensive.
Chairman, members of the board, one of the thoughts I have for what your question about using internal engineers is, I seem to be putting up roadblocks in your brain. The concern I would also have might be the gift clause violation that the state Supreme Court enforced on counties and municipalities, providing services to private residences at no cost or reduced cost. That might also be something that the county attorney would have to probably weigh in on.
Here's a loaded question a little. Would the fact that we were not enforcing our building code uniformly in the past make us in any way partly responsible for the situation we're in right now? With homeowners unaware of what they were deciding or something? I mean, I know that's a loaded question. You're not gonna wanna say, yeah, we're liable, but we issued them a dwelling without going through the full process.
Might I defer that to Mr. Joe Albo, the county attorney?
Okay.
For one, the doctrine of latches, which means resting on a right and then trying to exercise it later, doesn't apply to government. So the fact that we didn't enforce in previous years, decades, whatever, doesn't mean that the county can be held liable for now enforcing its laws.
Okay.
So essentially, unless the county does something else, the acceptance of illegal premises in the past by the county, or ignoring those premises in the past, does not create a liability for the county. That means that the county should begin to do that now.
Okay. Thank you.
I like the question, Steve, that's a good one.
The problem is that being expressed is that even though we may admit to that as a possible mistake by the county, we are not allowed to then make accommodation for that, which may then also be illegal. Special treatment, special issuance, overlooking once again, those kind of things. We can't just overlook it and say, let's make a special accommodation, because that would be acting the same way that we have in the past. We've overlooked things.
Sure, and if the board were to do something like that, if another resident challenged that, saying that the board acted in an arbitrary and capricious manner by taking that sort of action, that property owner may have a cause of action against the county, because the same right wasn't afforded to that owner or anyone else.
Right.
So making exceptions like that can create some legal liability for the county.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Chairman, members of the board. We can, I guess the next logical step would be to sort of talk about the discussion about why we're having this discussion about building permits and building codes. And so what I'd like to do is just briefly go over in the last year or so in Gila County. We've had Jessica Scabelli from the county attorney's office. She sits in on the planning and zoning commission meetings, and that particular organization or committee is there for homeowners, residents to come into and plead their case for a notice of violation that Randy's department may have issued for a building without a permit, for a zoning or for a zoning type of violation. Typically, they built something without a permit, and then they want to change the zoning of that particular property so they can keep that building there. A lot of times it's setback distances. It could be a structure, it could be a solar panel or something like that. That's not allowed. So they come into this commission and they plead their case, and we're represented, Gila County is represented by the county attorneys on that commission. And so a lot of these issues that are brought forward to this particular commission, this committee, planning and zoning committee, have to do with building permits. So in the guidance we received from the county attorney's office in the last 6 to 8 months, we've received some guidance as far as how staff is to enforce the current board adopted building ordinance. And so that's what is leading us to this discussion right here. From the county attorney's perspective, they have directed staff to uniformly enforce the building code across all unincorporated parts, all unincorporated properties in Gila County. So that's the direction we've received from the county attorney and how staff needs to enforce the adopted building code in Gila County. So we're here because of that, and that's sort of a change in how we've enforced a building code in the past. And so I can answer any question you have regarding that right now if you would like me to stop.
Are we into our next little item? 'Cause I
Aye.
think we're headed
Yeah.
there.
Yes, I think.
We're headed there right now. So you don't work for the county attorney's office, you work for the board of supervisory. So when it comes to uniformity and stuff like that, that needs to be brought to our attention so we can actually address things like that. We don't know. You know, we're like three mushrooms sitting up here on the board most of the time because we can't talk to each other anyway. And so when we don't have the information coming from the ground, we don't know what's going on. And what Michael's referring to is this issue in Young. And so I'm going to dive into it right now. In 1986, Jim Jones pushed the building code into Gila County to be adopted. Bob Bagondo was the director sitting in your seat at the time. Bob went through the process, which included a lot of town meetings, which none of them were good in Young, Arizona. But the building codes were passed. It's really vague on a lot of it. But somewhere along the way, since then, which would have still been many years behind us, we're just guessing somewhere in the mid-90s. It changed. We have yet to find the record, the minutes, or anything as to how come it changed, who changed it, or any of that. But what it did, it took and correct me if I'm wrong, Randy, please. It took the permitting process, still held to a permit, but the only thing inspected on this permit was electrical. And that had more to do with APS, if I'm not mistaken, than anything else. And that's just from hearsay. That's not what I can find in the minutes. That's just from hearsay. So from the mid-90s, let's say, to right now today, that's the process for that unincorporated circle called Young, Arizona. There's got to be more in the planning and zoning part of it for that circle right there, because it's mentioned in some of the previous documents about exempt. It's mentioned in some of the documents about an experimental area, but it's nothing specific. And the best conversation that Kathy had, and I've got it all on paper here, but was with Bob Bagondo. But Bob left the county and it turned over to another director and so forth. And I don't know, Joe, when was the county consolidated?
That happened after I was county attorney. It may have had, I don't know, and there have been,
After 2004, I think.
yeah, there have been 4 other county attorneys since I was a county, but I was county attorney in 1986
Right.
when this was adopted. And in the purpose section, it says, use, occupancy, location, and maintenance of all buildings and structures within the county. So there was no exemption in this ordinance for any part of the county.
Right, but in some of those minutes, we did uncover that. And we don't know what it means. I'll be the first to tell you or anybody, we don't know what it means. Unfortunately, a lot of the folks are gone, can't ask. I'm not gonna argue the fact that whether Pleasant Valley ought to follow the regular building codes like everyone else. That's not what I'm arguing about. What I am arguing about, and what I'm highly pissed off about, is the fact that when all this came about, the only reason I knew about it is I had a constituent call me and ask me, what the hell are you guys doing here? And tell me, it'd be like you know, George Randall calling you, asking you something, or you with George Allen. It's like, that is the one thing, if you want to ask me, that will set me off sooner than anything, is for something to happen that I'm not aware of took place. I went straight to you with it. And what did you do? You shook your head and looked at the floor and said, I didn't want to do that. I asked you about it. You knew nothing about it. But yet we have real estate agents in Young, Arizona selling property and doing their due diligence and being forthcoming in all their information and telling them what the permitting process was and not knowing that that change had been made. So the next phone calls I got was recent homeowners that bought property there saying, hey, I bought this property knowing I wanted to do these things on my house, and now I can't afford to do it. When did you guys do this? Make you feel like a real idiot to explain that one. I'm going to tell you right now. And the fact of the matter is, we didn't do it. This board sitting right here did not do it. And that is where I think we jumped the gun on this. The other part of this I'm going to tell you too is that's very, very disrespectful to the people there in Pleasant Valley not to at least have a community meeting to inform everybody that something like this is going on. No. You guys jumped right in there and pulled this one out of the hat and then went to charging people $1,500 for a permit from one day when it was $175 for electrical. Next day it was $1,500 for a full permit. And they had no idea. None. That makes us as a Board of Supervisors look pretty stupid, I'm telling you right now. I'm not arguing the fact that they should or shouldn't be paying the $1,500. I'm arguing the fact of this process that took place. And I brought Michael into a discussion later and told him what I had to say was, you back up, you put it back like it was, you run it through the process. You hold that town meeting. You bring it into a work session in front of the Board of Supervisors. We talk about, we discuss it, we come up with a solution and roll it into an agenda item. That did not happen, folks. And that's another thing that totally irritates me, because when I walked away from that meeting with Michael, I thought that was a done deal. No, there has yet to be any involvement with the people in that area, and we're still trying to go with that. And we're still, you guys are still working outside the realm of this board. And that right there, Tim, is what leads to no CFOs in this particular area. I have people up there that's built some hellacious houses, really nice houses. They go to Randy to get a permit. What does Randy do? He issues them a permit. Only thing you have to have is electrical inspected, $175. Here you go. Correct me if I'm wrong. They build houses that are nice. They don't have a CFO. One of those people right now today has a house sitting there that is amazing, and he's trying to do a short-term rental. Matter of fact, he was part of the process to help us figure all this out. He cannot do a short-term rental with that house unless it has a CFO on it. And to go through and get an engineer, unless you can find one that you can afford, and a lot of people can't do that, you're not going to do a short-term rental. And his house is as good as anybody's you've ever seen. So these are all the circumstances that have played out in this area that just set me afire. And I don't appreciate any of it. None. And that's why today, when we're arguing some of this and whatnot, a lot of this, I think, could have been avoided and worked out a lot different direction, but it was not. And it wasn't because this board was not involved. I don't know how many boards have been in place since the mid-90s, let's just say, because I don't know the exact date. But there's been several boards in place since then. Not a one of them took this issue on to look at it. How many community development directors have been in there since the mid-90s? I don't really know. I know Scott Buzon was there when I came into office, and Randy, I know you. I don't know who else. I know Bob Agondo in the 80s. Every one of those directors, not a one of them took it on. until this. Now, something tells me that there's other alternatives maybe? And if it's uniformity and we want to be fair across all of Gila County, I get it. I might vote against it, but I get it. But to make that decision was not cool outside this board. And so that's what I'm going to start with, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Is all I have to say is that if there's a law and we enforce it, then we enforce it. And if it wasn't brought to the board, that's management or whatever. But I think if we have laws, we need to enforce them, because I don't want to live in a lawless county. Or I don't want to live in a county where laws are different from one area to another. Because I was unaware of this. I never spent any time in Young. I never knew that Young, you could go up there and do whatever you wanted to without a permit. I wasn't aware of that. But I sure have a lot of people that are building in Tonto Basin that with a public meeting that Young hasn't required permits. I can only imagine the phone calls that I'm going to get from the 6,000 plus people whom I govern on why things are different in Gila County.
So let me clarify something, Tim, and it's real simple. I'm not arguing your thoughts. I'm not arguing your thoughts. But when you make the statement of no permit, that's inaccurate. That is not right. Randy issued permits on every dwelling that was in there except some that didn't want a permit and wasn't going to get a permit. That permit, the only thing that was inspected on that permit was the electrical. How or why that came to be, I have no idea.
Well, I guess the question would be is, Randy, who instructed you to only do electrical?
Chairman, members of the board, I'll ask Randy to explain that whole process, but I've also asked Randy and his staff to go back in time to look at the old documents in community development to see where some of these practices, internal practices, might have started. What director, what possible year, and to date, they've scoured those documents and haven't found any internal documentation for a director or a staff to direct other staff to do certain things out in Young compared to other counties, the other parts of the county. So we have looked at that, sir, because we have too. Right? We're curious, like, when did some of this start, right? And we can't, we don't have that.
So let me give you what I think is my best guess. I think it was long before consolidation. I think that a supervisor of that district, whoever it may have been at that time, walked into community development with whoever was the director with some issues and said, we're not doing that no more. And it changed. That's what I feel right now, because I cannot find, or Kathy cannot find, I want to verify that. Kathy and Sherry's done all the work, but Kathy has not been able to find anything in the minutes yet that says during such and such a board meeting, this was discussed, this was approved, this will be the process. We have not done that. So I think sometime before the consolidation, this is what happened. I'm not saying it was right or wrong. I'm just giving my 2 cents on what happened, which would have put it back when, you know, permitting was the furthest thing from my mind back then. And it continued on from that. Why? I have no idea. I don't know if as time went by there was other pressure that said keep it going like it is. You know, Young's small. Matter of fact, back in the 80s, back then, Young didn't amount to anything. And the real consensus was back then, they're out of sight and out of mind. Now that's changed, you know, and now we have things like this, which I'm not saying it may not needed to be discussed. I'm not saying that at all, but what I am saying is the process about where we went to do this. And I'm gonna tell you right now, it was outside the authority of this board, I guarantee you, to make that kind of decision like that that's gonna rock people's world like it did, and it's still doing today. And that's all right now, Mr. Chair.
Excuse me, what I'm gonna do, item 2B and 2C are so similar in topics and crossovers. We haven't opened up 2C for discussion, so officially I'm gonna do that now. That we're gonna have information and discussion regarding Gila County's building code ordinance, adoption and enforcement practices in unincorporated areas of Gila County. Okay, so now we're legally into the agenda enough to continue our discussion. And there will be crossovers because some of this does pertain to the STR issue and to the building codes, et cetera. So I appreciate Mr. Klein's comments.
I guess I have a couple questions again.
Yes.
Randy, is it something that you inherited? Electrical only?
Yes, sir. When I first came in, I never, to be honest with you, I never worked at a jurisdiction that had unzoned. So I asked questions. And I was told that ARS statute says electrical.
Told by?
Staff that was
Okay.
first coming. Scott Buzan is one of them, but other people have been here 20 plus years, I asked. And so I started looking, you know, is there a statute? Today, I have not been able to find anything that went that way. And I would agree with Mr. Klein. I do believe that probably a supervisor came in and said, this is what we're gonna do, and suck it up. And I have no proof either. We've went through numerous pieces of paper and looked for things. I found the APS letter where APS requested us to do electrical inspection. I found that. That was back when Joe Mendoza was around.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fine. I just wanted to know if you inherited this.
Yes, sir.
And then you were directed because you found out state law that we can't treat part of the county differently than we treat other parts of the county. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. Then I guess I have a question to Mr. Minlove. You've been manager for 8 years now, and help with the agenda that comes before the board, and Supervisor Klein is saying, how come this issue never came up before the board? And all of a sudden now it's a can of worms. Is this an issue that you felt important a long time ago or just recently? And that's why this has come up the way it has?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Humphrey, the issues that have come up made it a pressing matter that we needed to have this discussion.
Okay.
So when the issues started coming up, arranged to have this work session and have this discussion.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I wasn't aware that Young didn't need permits until here recently when these things started happening. It's like, holy smokes, you know? Because like I say, now constituents are going to know that we do have differences and that we do have things, and I'm sure planning and zoning is going to get a lot of questions on, I just want an electrical permit from Donald Basin. I can see that coming already. So, okay, I have no other questions for this right now. It came up and is nipping at our heels for us to fix it, and that's something that, you know, we all probably wished would have come up prior, but it didn't, and it's in our ballparks to deal with.
The question that I see before us right now is not the historical issue, because we know things were done, and we're here today with this. Do we adopt the ordinance, the building code ordinance, universally throughout the county, which I would think we should? There will be an impact for those who have not been used to that. And how do we do that? What's the path going forward? Do we attempt to protect a particular area like Pleasant Valley from certain things or not? I've heard that basically legally we should not be doing that. It does affect the other areas of the county. They're saying, well, why don't we get treatment like that? And now it's coming back to bite, because we come up with another ordinance, the short-term rental, and it's biting those now that wish to have that use on their property, and they can't do it without going through a more expensive process. And so I think we need to seek solutions of how we're going to manage this going forward. What do we do?
Mr. Chair, I have one more issue as to that. Over the course of 30 years, let's just say, it goes back to Mendoza, those properties have turned over multiple times, different ownerships. This one builds a shed over here, this one builds a barn over here, this one builds something else over there. When you guys turned this around, one of the things you wanted was the site plan. And then when you looked at the site plan, it showed these extra buildings that might have been built 3 owners previous that were unpermitted or under the same deal or whatever it was. And you asked them to bring those up to snuff. How are you going to do that? You got properties there. I mean, these aren't all the first owners of those properties. There could be 10 different owners on any one of those properties that do different things.
But that happens everywhere. I mean, if you buy a property in Wheatfields and a garage was built without a permit, when you buy that property, you accept that property.
Understand.
And so now the person that built it's not liable, but you as the property owner are liable for whatever was built without a permit, no matter where you're at.
But we're talking about an area here that hadn't even been through those hoops. Back in those ownerships, that's what they needed. They needed that permit for the electrical, basically, I guess, or whatever. Built. So then people are jumping backwards trying to, how are we gonna do this? You know? I'm not saying it doesn't happen other places, but that's another issue to this problem.
Well,
And that goes back, Tim, I just want to say this, I don't want to cut you off, but I just want to say, that goes back to us jumping the gun. That goes back to us needing these discussions up front, saying, how are we going to address these other concerns that are going to come up? We didn't do that. We went from yesterday being one way till today to being another.
Chairman, members of the board, I can answer your question regarding uniform enforcement, and then if Mr. Joe Albo could correct me if I get something wrong. The state statute requires staff enforce the building code uniformly to all areas, all properties in unincorporated Gila County. There are no exceptions. So I hope that, and as far as some of the solutions, we have been working with the county attorney's office and trying desperately to see what other counties have in their tool belt for a possible solution. And currently right now, for those properties for 30 years ago that were built without a permit, unbeknownst to staff or knowingly by the staff. So we're trying to come up with a solution legally, and right now we're still in the research phase of that.
okay, kind of, Mr. Chair, if I may, where I'm at with it is a lot of people in my district have purchased, not a lot, but quite a few, have purchased properties that they had buildings that were built without a permit on their property. Some by themselves and some by others. And then they wanted to remodel their building. Planning and zoning says, well, you got to come up to snuff with what you got before we can go forward. And in the 9 years that I've been a supervisor, staff has worked very well with these people to help them get into code if they will work with staff. I have had many people come to me and say, what the heck? Well, okay, this is how it is, and so this is what you need to do. But staff has worked, and we have solved many building without permit problems if the homeowner is willing to work with staff. Staff has been very helpful on helping them with, okay, we need the footers done, or overhangs, or things, whatever may be the issue. Staff has worked with a lot of these people in my district going forward. And so I would say that, yeah, when I was called by constituents, it's like, what the heck am I gonna do? How can I deal with it? And staff has been very helpful. And the ones that told staff to stick it in their ear, well, they still haven't got cleared. But the ones that were willing to work with staff has been, in most of my cases, very helpful in helping people, because a lot of these weren't built half-heartedly. Most people seems that, with or without a permit, they're overbuilding. You know, I mean, they don't want it to fall down. And and most of them know what they were doing when they built. And so I would say in the future, working with staff, that a lot of these, if you break them down, that they're solvable issues at a piece at a time, because they're not going to put up trusses that don't work. I mean, for the most part, or they're not going to underdo footers. Most of the footers are overdone. And so I'm just saying, building without permits that I've dealt with staff while I've been a supervisor, staff has been very helpful. And then once they felt they had a team going forward in tackling this, they felt a lot better about their situation than they did with all of a sudden, what the heck am I gonna do?
You know, and you're right on that instance as far as people overbuilding. Most of them do. As a county, if we permit a structure and it falls down, is the county gonna go back and rebuild it for them? No, we're not gonna do that.
Contractor might have to.
But people, well, or if people build it themselves, I'm used to seeing a lot of people building their own, but
Right.
but if they're gonna put $200,000 or $300,000, $400,000 into a structure, a dwelling, they don't want it to fall down,
Right.
you know? But it gets hard to go back and prove how that structure was built and what's in there without being very costly. And these are all issues that I'm not saying can't be resolved and have a way of working through it. This is just all part of this process that took place when they jumped the gun.
Right.
And Tim, that goes back to all three of us sitting here. That's the last call you want from your constituents, is to ask you, what in the world are you guys doing?
Oh, I get several of them.
What about the avenue of a conditional use or a variance? Is there any options there?
Two completely different processes, sir. So variance must meet very specific state requirements that have to do with the property itself, not the buildings. In other words, if the property is itself right next to a flood area and that impacts what the homeowners want to put on there, they can allow the process to apply for variance, but it has to be related to the property.
Okay.
The CUP is an interesting process that we use in Gila County that is, this board knows. CUPs have been in front of this board multiple times. Basically what a CUP is taking that property and allowing that property be rezoned to what the guidelines of that CUP are attached to it, right? Basically, we're saying, the county board is saying, we approve this property to be zoned this way. In other words, if somebody built a business on a residential area and this board and they go through the process of obtaining a CUP, it's approved by planning and zoning, we come in front of the board and the board approves it, and there's these requirements attached to the CUP, then that basically rezones that individual parcel to what the CUP says. There's a challenge in that because if we issue a lot of CUPs, we don't know, we don't have the staff and resources to go back out into the field and check on whether the homeowners or property owners are following the guidelines of the CUP. So we're basically issuing the CUP, and if there's a call for a complaint, then we'll go out there and if that property has a CUP attached to it, staff will determine whether those original guidelines that this board or previous boards have approved are being followed. And if they aren't, then we'll issue a notice of violation. So that's how the process works. The variance goes through a state guideline, the CUP goes through planning and zoning. So,
So there's no remedy there for the lack of a C of O?
currently not currently.
Okay. Mr. Menlo.
Oh, go ahead, James.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we as staff, we definitely work for you as boards of supervisors. Everything we do should be under your direction. In this instance, there had been a common practice, it appears, since the mid-90s that we have carried on for 30 years of not requiring a full-blown building permit in the community of Young, Arizona. That the only requirement was there's a building permit issued, the only inspection was for electrical as required by APS. It was wrong for us as staff to make a change in what had been a common practice, whether it was by an action of the board or by one supervisor that said, do this. It doesn't really matter. It was a common practice that we had at Gila County to only require the electrical inspection for probably around 30 years. And by that common procedure that we had done, it was wrong of us to take action and change the way we worked with your constituents in a different manner. That should have come to you as the Board of Supervisors to have this discussion that we were having 6 months too late, but we are having now. What is the remedy? As you stated, Mr. Chairman, what is the remedy? Where do we go from here? And that's really where we need to go and what we need to have an understanding. In my opinion, and I believe that it has been stated that by state law we cannot exempt a certain portion of our community, of our state, or of our county from what the board has adopted as building codes. And so that is where this has come from, that trying to take that state law that we have to apply our building codes countywide. We did not come to you, did not make awareness, did not have community meetings, all staff's errors and mistakes in not properly communicating with you and the people of Gila County. Where do we go from here? I understood that, well, you know, there's existing structures. Maybe it's not just in Young, but it's people that have built things throughout the county that did not receive a permit. Do we give them I don't know what the right term is, that okay, you built this and we're not going to require that you have to go out and get a building permit, a certificate of occupancy after the fact? Can we do that? I don't know. Is there something, if we allowed a practice that was against state law, are we liable that we should, just asking the questions here, that we as a county should be liable to pay for that engineer to go out and do a complete assessment of a property?
No.
Questions, just questions that I have regarding this. But the simple fact is that I believe that we are going to have to enforce our building codes countywide, regardless of the areas. And so we need to work on a transition period to get to that point, is what my belief is. And doing that is that public meetings, additional discussions, or a vote by the Board of Supervisors say, yeah, we are going to enforce our building codes countywide on by such and such a date, and then go do public information meetings, town halls with people. That's the discussion that I want to see, is what your recommendations, what your thoughts are on a transition. Because until I'm told otherwise, I believe that we do have to apply our state law and county ordinances countywide, and that we need to work on a transition period to get to that point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Aren't we already doing that now, though? I mean, we're not gonna change the direction we're going right now. Are we not fully implementing the code everywhere
Members of the
right
board.
now?
Yes, we are. Yes, it's uniform enforcement of the building code.
And that's been going on for how long?
The first email I sent and the direction I received from the county attorney was July 28th, I believe, and then September 12th. So those legal opinions that I sent out to this board had 2 items to discuss: building without a permit, what staff does, how we handle, based on the current board-approved building ordinance, how staff handles complaints building without permits, in particular young, and then the enforcement of the requiring the building permits and C of Os, certificate of occupancy. Those were 2 separate rulings by the county attorney interpreting the current board-approved building code.
So the transition's actually already occurred, whether or not we like the way it happened, it's already occurred.
Correct, sir.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
could I go ahead and bring up that do we need to, if we've had a common practice for 30 years, do we need to have a vote by the Board of Supervisors for you to direct us as staff to fully apply the building code countywide? Since staff has been going on for 30 years of just having a limited building permit or limited inspection, do we need to have direction from you as Board of Supervisors to apply it countywide?
I think that question ought to be directed to our county attorney, not the Board of Supervisors. I don't run the state laws nor the county laws.
Sure.
You know, Mr. Chairman, the state law says what it says, and it has shall in both things, so the county doesn't have any option but to follow state law. So it's ineffectual for the board to take any action to say we're gonna follow the state law. You're required to follow the state law. So there's no need to do that. There may be other options that are available that need to be explored by staff in the county attorney's office. And while I have the microphone, one thing I'd like to address is that the county attorney's office does not give direction. The county attorney's office gives advice. It's up to the client to determine what they want to do with that advice. For example, if an attorney in private practice doing criminal law has a client facing the death penalty and advises that client, it's my advice that you plead guilty and avoid the death penalty. The client's choice is to say, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go to trial, and if I get the death penalty, I get the death penalty. The choice is the client's, not the lawyer's. So the lawyer never directs a client. The lawyer advises the client. And our advice has been that the state law says what it says, and the county, to avoid liability, needs to follow state law.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I might.
Yes.
Okay, with the sudden change, us needing to change, no public meeting, no letting people know, a lot of people are going to be faced, not only in Young, where it's been a practice for 30 years, but throughout the county, people that have built without permits or have purchased property without permits, and so now they're responsible for that property without permits. You asked earlier about paying for an engineer. Well, that could cost the county a lot of money paying for an engineer. But the thing of it is I'm wondering if planning and zoning, if we do go to a public meeting, it's one thing to tell people the penalty, but in my opinion, at the same time, you have to try to help them. And so perhaps a position for planning and zoning, now that we're changing the tide of the ocean, to help those people become compliant. And they may need an engineer, but depending on the position, if the position to help planning and zoning was in structural engineer, then perhaps that structural engineer could approve some of these deals without having to hire an engineer, because we're trying to help the people that all of a sudden got their world turned over. But we have a lot of people that their world gets turned over every day. We're dealing with some. We have a lot of issues with this. So perhaps with this change of tide, we need to maybe open a position for planning and zoning with a structural engineer involved in that position to help us with these building without permits for people that are trying to comply with Gila County. Because then, okay, we had to abide by the law. We have to make people abide by the law. And we can't change the law for some and not others. But here's something that we're going to try to do to help you become compliant with the law. And so, you know, I don't open positions just as a recommendation. That's the county manager, but I'm sure Randy could always use more help, especially when it comes to not only building without permits, but perhaps we get plans in that it wouldn't hurt for our own engineer to look over as we get permits. So maybe we could, in a public meeting with people, and a lot of questions, and it's like, okay, we understand the position you're in, but here's what we're going to do go forward in trying to not only help those at the tide change, but countywide, and people that ended up with buildings that were built without permit.
So I think you threw out some good points, Tim, and I do think there's a way of working with it. Okay? I've never said that there wasn't. You know, and I think that's gonna take a lot of looking into, a lot of discussion, asking other people questions, maybe seeing if there's other counties out there, what they do. But I do think there is a way of working with this issue. But this isn't, I don't feel like just one of those deals where we slap it on the desk and vote on it in 2 minutes and be done.
As far as abiding by the law?
No, because what Joe said about state statute. It says you got to do this. Okay, then I guess we got to do that. See, you got to go back to my earlier conversation. I have never once argued the fact that Pleasant Valley should not abide by permits. I've never said that. You know, and if that's the state statute, then I'm not going to jail to break state statute. Tell you guys and everybody else that's listening today, I'm not going to do that. My whole deal is the process, but having an idea thrown out there on the table, or several ideas that we could maybe work with to put something together to help these folks. You know, we keep focusing on Young, but I know Young ain't the only place.
Well, that's what I said.
You know,
countywide, I've got a lot of BWAPs.
And I'll tell you another thing. Back before this county was consolidated, things happened in districts, didn't they, Joe?
Yes, sir.
And so we're just getting the brunt of it. We're just happen to be sitting in these seats today or whenever it was to take care of it. you know, and in a lot of ways, it's already taking care of it for us, just because of the state. But yeah, I think going forward, there is ways of doing it. I just don't know. I can't sit here and tell you what that is until we have a lot more discussion and have some ideas thrown out there. But I do know it ain't just Pleasant Valley.
I'm confident in this board that our attitude is compassionate to those who may suffer, but we have to right wrongs if wrongs have been committed. We cannot have the ordinance applied unevenly. I think we all agree with that. And we've already made a transition that's partly, at least partly painful, and perhaps could have been done in a more soothing way, but we're there already. We're moving forward. I appreciate Randy's attitude has always been, I have to follow the book. And that gets a little frustrating sometimes when you say, can't you make an exception? But for us to do that is the old paths. That's what happened in the past. And so I've encountered several things in my district that previous supervisors said, hands off, don't touch, don't look at it, I don't want you to address it. And now we have to look at those things, and it is painful. And so, but we have to kind of grow up and get there. But there's a structure in portals right now that's been that way for a long time. Permitted, I don't know, I can't remember, but built incorrectly, not permitted correctly, whatever it is, and setbacks and all these other things that are wrong. And it's ugly and it's horrible, and it's been that way for 2, 3, 4 years, just languishing on the hillside, and the neighbors hate it. And but we can't just say, well, it's okay, just go ahead. We can't just break the rules on one property versus another. And so I have also learned more strongly lately that when you purchase a property, you can't just assume everything's okay. You have to go out there and find out what's going on. And it may not be something that your title company discovers or the lending institution. You have to go and find out whether or not things are right with that property. And I don't believe people generally know that. And so there are 10, 15 owners past problems, and now they go, well, the county's gonna make me do this or that, and I feel that that's just completely wrong. And so here we are caught with that. And no, it's not easy. Today's not easy. But we have to have a direction, and I think the direction is to make improvements in our process. And there's gonna be some people that are not gonna like that.
Well, I think we have to offer to the people any help that we can
Yes.
as they go through their process, not just say, here you go, deal with it. It's like, here you go, but here's how we can help, or we will try to help if you'll work with us. Because you have in the past, for me, planning and zoning has been great in helping me with building without permits in my district that people obtained. And so, like I say, that with a rush of things, I would like to see perhaps a position to help, to let the people know that not only are we offering to help, but we're putting staff on that can perhaps help them. But that's my 2 cents.
I'm with you on that, Tim. I do have some more questions for the board that I don't feel like it's appropriate out here to discuss. And I'd like to make a motion for an executive session, talk more about this.
Okay, we have a motion for an executive session right now. Do we have a second?
I don't have a problem with whatever we have to discuss. I don't know what you got on your mind, but after a discussion like this, we have people on the TVs, and all of a sudden we're gonna shut them off and go talk about things behind closed doors when we've just opened a mousetrap.
I made the motion. You guys don't have to take it, but I made it.
For clarification, sir, is that a motion for legal advice or consultation with the county attorney's office?
Yes, partly.
Okay, so, in other words, it's not a discussion, that would involve, employees that would, need to be notified of such a discussion?
Not at this point.
Okay, then I will second the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Let's have
One
an exec-
opposed.
Those opposed?
Aye.
So, let's have. We're missing Payson. Okay, all right. We have to wait for Lisa. So this guy walks into a bar.
It might end better if he walked in a church.
So this mob went into a church. I have 7 tickets here, so I can request more if you'd like, or you can request more.
Mr. Minlove, I think, requested more.
Okay.
Like,
So do you want to take,
your office is in charge.
would you like to take possession of these right now, or should I offer them to the supervisors?
That's okay, let him take,
Okay.
you know, because there's plenty of time. When is it?
It's February 25th.
Yeah, that's a month.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ensure that all.
I won't be
Sure.
here.
Yeah,
You won't be here?
have the opportunity to be.
What day is that fall on? Monday?
It's on a Wednesday.
Wednesday. Yeah, yeah. We'll just be getting back. Might be back sooner than that if the government's closed down.
Hey, who's betting on the Super Bowl? Is it? Now, is it?
Yeah, especially after watching New England play.
She's coming back.
Thank you.
A week or 2 weeks?
Okay, Lisa's present again, so I will call to order again our regular board meeting. And there is no discussion regarding the executive session or vote thereof. So, where do we stand with the presentation and all of that? Mr. O'Driscoll, have we concluded our discussion?
Chairman, members of the board, yes, we have, unless there are additional questions.
Okay, Supervisor Humphrey, any additional questions?
As far as A, B.
Active at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, okay. And then I'm ready to proceed.
Okay, do you have any questions?
I do not at this point until I hear more.
Mr. O'Driscoll has concluded his presentation. So, Mr. Klein, do you have any questions?
No, the only thing I'd say is we got a lot more homework to do on this.
So, can you give a list? Well, are you clear as to what homework we might need to be doing?
Chairman, members of the board, yes, I am.
You are, okay.
We're currently trying to find a solution, long-term solution, county attorney's office,